For most of this century, China has been ripped apart by bloodshed and struggle. At the heart of this turmoil has been the Chinese army. Created as a force to propel Mao Zedong and his communists to power, it swept 1/4 of the world's people towards the vision of a new China. No army has ever had such impact on the lives of so many. Formed as a true army of the people, it is now torn between liberation and oppression, the people or the party. This is the story of the forces that shaped these loyalties, that made it possible for a people's army to turn on the people. Mao's Red Army, China's new Great War, the People's Liberation Army. China has more people than any other country, more than 1 billion in all. Every hour, some 2,500 babies are born. Most will be of peasant families, as these are the backbone of China. Within this sprawling nation, the army forms its own society. It influences every aspect of life. Its soldiers are everywhere. To serve in the army has been traditionally both a duty and an honor. People have always held the ordinary soldier in high regard. Children are brought up to admire and respect the army. There's every chance that one day they too will serve in it. For decades, the People's Liberation Army has been one of China's most powerful and secretive institutions. Never before have foreigners been taken on such an epic journey to see the Chinese military machine at work. To understand this army is to come a little closer to understanding China. It is an army like no other. The People's Liberation Army, or the PLA as it is known, is made up of the Army, Navy and Air Force. With more than 3 million soldiers in its ranks, it is second only to the Soviet Union. Every year, the authorities decide how many new soldiers are required. Officially, it's voluntary, but each province has a quota to fill, and if there's any problem with numbers, a member of your local committee might call on you to remind you it's time to do your duty. This is a peasant army. Here in Lofushan in southern China, This company is typical. Most of its men come from peasant families. In China, there are very few ways to improve your living standards. You live and work where the party tells you to. Although the training and conditions are very basic, for these young men, the army is one of the few escape routes available. It's better than absolute poverty.
My name is Cheng Dongxi. I joined the army in 1986. I'm 20 now. As soon as I graduated from school, I joined the army. For me, to be in the army is to fulfill the duty and obligation of a citizen.
Like other recruits, Chen Dongxi has never been away from home before. The army can post him anywhere in China and does not allow him to return home for the first year. Girlfriends are officially forbidden. He has only one loyalty. The army is his family now.
How did I join? I applied voluntarily. I've been in the army for 3 years. My parents agreed, more or less. Well, if I'm not called on to fight, I'll go home when I'm demobilized. I can't go home until I've served my 3 years.
To serve in the PLA is a chance to learn a trade, as a driver perhaps, an electrician or a cook. But more importantly, in China, where personal connections count for everything, army life builds friendships that will open doors for you as a civilian. An opportunity to move to the city or to join the Communist Party. Above all, it gives you a sense of belonging.
What's so special about the PLA was the feeling of being in one huge family.
Esther Sampson is now headmistress of an English primary school, but in 1949 she joined the Chinese Revolution. Zhou Ying, as she was known, spent 7 years as a soldier in the PLA.
To be an ordinary common soldier was to be something quite glorious, and we took great pride in being ordinary with nothing special about us and one of the masses, because we were indoctrinated that way, that the most important thing was to be one of the masses and to be like a peasant.
First-year recruits earn only 12 yuan a month, a mere $3. That's very little in modern China. If you're young and ambitious, you can earn 10 times as much in the city. That can make it less attractive to join, and for some soldiers, the poor pay has become a cause of low morale. These men are arguing over a bet, only a tin of food, but to them that's an important matter, enough to swap a few healthy obscenities over. So important is the tin of food that the loser will be made to shave his pubic hair. The PLA likes to be seen as defensive, looking after the longest land borders in the world. But in fact, this army has fought more full-scale wars in the last 40 years than any other power, always obeying the political will of the party. Since the Communist Revolution, more Chinese soldiers have died in foreign wars than those of any other country. They have the reputation of being among the toughest foot soldiers on earth, with an almost fanatical belief in the motherland. It's taken them into Korea, India, the Soviet Union, and now into frequent battles at the border with Vietnam. There are regular patrols along the Vietnam border. Among her 12 neighbours, China has none that can be called good friends. Communist Vietnam used to be friendly, but in 1979, growing tensions reached flashpoint and China launched an attack. This was no skirmish. In less than a month of fighting, more than 50,000 soldiers were killed and many more wounded.
There's something I'd like to say. As soldiers, we're fighting for peace. Of course, we are ready to fight, but it's for the sake of peace.
I became a soldier for the sake of the country, for the sake of the nation. It is our responsibility for the country, for the nation. The border of our country is so long. The world is not too peaceful. We have to defend ourselves.
Peace, patriotism, defence of the motherland. These are the phrases repeated by every Chinese soldier. It's a sign of an unusual degree of motivation, a belief in the justice of their actions. These soldiers from No. 3 Squad 8th Company are in constant training and manoeuvres. They could be called to the front at any time. This is Colonel Zhao. He's a veteran of the major battles with Vietnam and is the military commander of the brigade these men belong to.
We want to let the world know that the Chinese people can't be bullied. We are determined to defend our border areas.
But these men have another commander to obey. He's the political commissar, Colonel Zhou, equal in every respect to the military commander. He's responsible for the correct thinking of these men. He's part of a system to ensure that the army follows the Communist Party line. Like a good coach, he makes sure the team pulls together. But having two commanders must surely lead to disagreement.
There's no way we could have that kind of conflict, because plans are passed after repeated discussion and we come to a collective decision.
For the most part, there are no big conflicts. Decisions are reached through discussion. If it's at all possible, we come to an agreement.
China has been involved in conflicts all along her border. War with India, uprisings in Tibet, and 30 years of disputes with the Soviet Union on the longest frontier in the world. Here, on the frozen Black Dragon River, it's minus 30 degrees. Only 500 meters away is Siberia, and a Russian watchtower observes the Chinese border guards. The ski patrol checks for any signs of unauthorized movement across the border. Their job is as much to keep people in as it is to keep them out. Staff Sergeant Su is from the hot southern province of Hunan. He's endured this posting for 4 years.
The climate here is rather cold for us, and at first it took a while to get used to. Then, after all sorts of cold endurance training, like washing our faces with snow and even showering in cold water, after about 6 months we were all pretty well used to the cold.
Mind over matter. This display by the Beijing 3rd Garrison is not about physical toughness. It's mental determination that counts. To these commandos, too, discipline is everything. They are an elite corps trained by masters of the martial arts. The PLA has created a soldier who will do whatever is required, whatever the party wants. But where did this army come from? What gave it this tradition? Every army has its own mythology, its symbols of heroism. Dunkirk, Gallipoli. Defeats in military terms, but victories of the human spirit. For the PLA, and indeed all of China, these heroes in stone represent that spirit. In 1934, 85,000 men and women set out on a march across China, the Long March. It was perhaps the longest retreat in history. Of the thousands who started it, only a fraction would survive. But so profound was its effect on this country that over 50 years later, veterans of it are still running China. Taking his grandson home from school is Jiang Aiping, former Vice Premier, Defense Minister, and a Long March veteran.
The Long March was an important time, not just for the PLA, but for the whole Chinese Revolution. Basically, the march is an expression of how the people of China threw off the yoke of imperialism and feudalism and cast off oppression and exploitation.
In the 1920s, China was deeply divided between the nationalist government and the Communist Party. In 1927, the nationalists turned on the communists and slaughtered thousands. As a result, the communists formed their own army. Determined to wipe them out, the huge nationalist forces surrounded the communist base. To have any hope of survival, the Red Army had to break out of this blockade and establish a new base. So the Long March began. No one knew how long it would take or even where they were going.
The Long March was absolutely incredible as an achievement in human terms, because the men and women who went through it went through every hardship known to man, not just battle hardships, but the terrible hardships of mountain terrain, desert terrain, going without food, getting lost in bogs and rivers. Even today, I don't understand how they did it.
This battle for the Luding Bridge was the most critical. Although it's filmed like a Hollywood version of history, if the Red Army hadn't taken the bridge of iron chains, they would have been trapped and probably annihilated. The Long March created an heroic legacy, an image the PLA loves to project. Those who took part became the aristocracy of China. But it also created a die-hard leadership with the belief that struggle and bloodshed are ultimately the only solutions to political problems. It's not the politics, but the personal hardships that are remembered most vividly by 85-year-old Sun Yi.
I walked at least 8,000 miles of the total 10,000 miles of the long march. Sometimes I could hardly keep up with the Red Army because of diarrhea. I like 3 days behind, but summoned up all my strength and finally caught up with the army. I had diarrhea 91 times during one day. I made a note each time with my pen.
When they set out, the main column stretched for 80 kilometres, but the losses were dreadful. Within 2 months, more than half of them were dead. Leadership squabbles and bad tactics took their toll. A new leader emerged, Mao Zedong. He believed that without the support of the peasants, the Red Army could not survive. If the peasants had faith in the communists, then nothing could stop the revolution.
Mao had indoctrinated them to treat the peasants as their friends. These men were, all of them, peasants. There was a code of conduct, and the most important thing was they were not to steal, not to rape, not to murder, not to burn. They were to treat the peasants as they had never been treated in war or peace before.
It was more than just a battle for survival. As the Long March proceeded, millions of peasants came into contact with the Red Army and learned not to fear it.
Yes, there was a difference. When the communists came to our village, they meant what they said. Towards the ordinary people, they were very good. They helped us common people with our land and with our houses by sweeping and fetching water. The soldiers and the civilians joined together. That was the way to win the war. If we hadn't the support of the masses, then it wouldn't have been possible. The soldiers who had been wounded during the fighting, well, we just left them in the homes of the local people, and the masses of the poor peasants gave them shelter.
Those who stayed behind continued to spread the word, and the peasants with nothing to lose were a ready source of new recruits. At the same time, the Red Army was a vicious enemy. There were punishments and executions, hostages held for ransom. Some were prisoners for over a year, like missionary Alfred Bosshart.
They were very kind to the poor people, but very cruel to those that oppressed others. So they were, in a sense, like Robin Hood's men. Stealing from the rich and giving to the poor.
At that time, we followed the principle of cracking down on the local landlords and dividing up their land. We were not lenient with them.
Oh, no. No, the landlords were looked upon as the arch enemy of the people.
The peasants were encouraged to take out their bitterness on the hated landlords. The Red Army's usual tactic was to fine the landlords a large sum for their crimes against the people, give them a few days to pay, and if they failed, execute them.
They wouldn't use ammunition. They had these long, curved executioner's swords. They were tied with their hands behind their backs, asked to kneel down, and then they raised their hands so that the head came forward. And then they, generally with one stroke, they beheaded them.
We just took away their land, their property and money. We did not physically destroy them. We didn't harm them.
There was one old lady who was a hostage for the landlord, and she couldn't walk. She had little feet. And they dragged her along for a long time. And then they sent word up the line, this lady can't walk anymore, shall we free her? And they said, no, just kill her. And I actually saw about 5 of teenage soldiers just haggling, I want to do it, I want to do it.
Mao said revolution is not a tea party. Revolution is an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. As the communists struggled on, their aim became clearer: to join with comrades in the north and form a base from which they could fight an even greater threat than the nationalists, the invading Japanese. More than a year after they'd started, the Red Army, now only 4,000 strong, reached its destination, the bleak hills of Yan'an. Living in caves which they dug out of the hillsides, they set about establishing a model community with the peasants. Blockaded by the huge nationalist army, the communists had to feed and clothe themselves. This dependence on each other produced a genuine sense of equality between the ranks. They call it the spirit of Yan'an. The same sense of unity is still expected of every soldier in the PLA.
The Chinese army has a characteristic. It is unity. We call it comradeship in arms. That means we love each other like brothers. The relationship is the same as between brothers and sisters. When we're together, we feel very relaxed, very close to each other.
There wasn't the contrast between officers and ordinary men. I don't ever remember having to salute anybody or kowtow to anybody or to feel that they were any better than me. But I don't remember them being dressed any differently. And certainly they didn't have any epaulets or stripes or whatever which made them different. Sometimes they might have a pair of leather shoes, but that was the only difference.
The relations between us are not like relations between officers and soldiers, but in a political sense, our relations are equal.
The Yan'an years lasted about 10 years, and they were the most remarkable revolutionary training period that any group has ever had. They had territory, peasant territory. They were able to try out in practice all the different means that they would later try out when the People's Republic was founded.
And most important of all was correct political thinking. The idea was that if your men understood their aims and objectives clearly, they would be motivated to achieve them. This was the job of the political commissar, and it is a system which influences the army to this day. From his cave in the Yan'an Hills, Mao devised a method of education that was simple but effective. Teach people how to read and write, and you can teach them what to think. He founded the Red University, where literature and art were to serve the purposes of the revolution. An army without culture, Mao said, is a dull-witted army, and a dull-witted army cannot defeat the enemy.
Political indoctrination and education were right at the core of what the Red Army was all about. These men who came in were young peasants. They were illiterate. They didn't know anything. They were taught what Mao wanted them to know, and they were also taught to read and write. They had little signs with Chinese characters that were on the backs of the man in front of you, and you learned that character as you marched along, and many people found the Red Army an educational institution.
同学们，有一个电视连续剧。
To this day, education and correct political thinking go hand in hand. Here, in one of the PLA's most modern training academies, future officers learn about techniques of film storytelling and editing. One of the purposes of the class is to learn how to recognize a beneficial film from one that might produce conflicting feelings among their troops.
As an army, we should have uniform thought. It's not possible for individuals to do what they want to do. The reason we need political classes is that everyone must think the same. People mustn't be allowed to think merely for themselves as individuals.
Days, it used to really amaze me how they'd come in very reluctant and say, well, we're not really interested in politics. And then maybe 3 days later, after ideological reformation or lectures, they would come absolutely 100% behind the Communist Party, completely changed over.
This is Li Jianping. He's a major in the PLA. But he's only ever done a month of military training, yet both he and the army believe he has a vital role to play.
我从小喜欢舞蹈。I'm Li Jianping. I love dancing since I was a child. I like the army dance companies particularly because they are the best in the country. The purpose of the army dance troops is to serve the soldiers, to give them the cultural performances they need, so they can be enriched in thought as well as entertained.
These boys are from the 2nd Artillery Dance Troop. They've been selected from the Jinan military region to be trained at the PLA Arts Academy. The best of them will follow in the footsteps of soldiers like Li Jianping. The PLA also trains other artists like musicians and filmmakers, as well as these young dancers.
That's our cultural and artistic tradition. During the years of the war, at that time, we set up many such groups for the purpose of defeating the enemy, raising our morale and unifying the masses. So it was necessary to carry out this revolutionary cultural propaganda work.
Even on the Long March, there was a young acting troupe which was sent ahead of the army to tell of its good deeds and spread the revolutionary word. Ordinary soldiers are also encouraged to take part in performances in their spare time. These tank drivers are rehearsing a concert for their comrades in the 6th Tank Division. Propaganda is not a dirty word in the PLA. But what started as a powerful weapon to unite people towards a common goal has become a tool for political domination. Its effect is to create only one line of thought. And if you're poor, uneducated, and have only one source of information, then how can you realize that there are other choices? In 1984, this song, The Blood Red Flag, topped the Chinese charts. The singer is a major in the PLA, a graduate of the Arts Academy. The song is about the war with Vietnam.
也许我告别将不再回来，你是否理解？你是否明白？也许我倒下将不再起来。
Ask any Chinese soldier what he thinks of fighting, death, or dying, and the chances are you'll get the same response. The political commissars have done their work well.
In my heart, of course, I'm afraid of dying. But when I think of our comrades dying so young, I feel compelled to defend our country bravely in order to repay them.
In my heart, I'm frightened of war combat. But when I think of those who are cowardly, I'm not afraid anymore. Yes, I miss home. But then I think of those soldiers who died in Vietnam. They miss home even more. We feel very sorry for them. Whenever I think of them, I don't miss home anymore.
I don't feel like a hero because the battle was won through the efforts of all the officers and men of the company. If I hadn't been covered by my comrades in arms, I'd be a dead man. I'd be 6 feet under by now. So the real heroes are already dead.
This is the Peace Hospital of the People's Liberation Army, the Vietnam Veterans Ward. These are a few of the 37,000 wounded in the conflict with Vietnam. Some will be given work in PLA factories. Others will receive a plot of land. They have paid their price.
I have quite a few wounded soldiers from the border between China and Vietnam in my ward. They have been here a few months already. They received some treatment at the front, such as amputation, but the stumps were not treated properly, and now they require further attention.
My name is Wang Xiaoming. I'm 19. I was wounded defending the Laoshan front line. I was wounded on May 19th last year at our defense position. One night, enemy spies sneak-raided our position. They drew our attention to the front. There were 2 spies. One secretly laid mines behind us. We only discovered that the next day. I stepped on a mine that day. Our comrades only realized that night that we had been tricked by the enemy. And then they rescued me. I was taken away during the day. We had heard that the Vietnamese were fighting hard at the front line, and we were prepared for it. My family really supported me. It was fine at home. They were really upset. Much more than me.
The spirit of self-sacrifice, glorious death for the motherland. This is the heritage every PLA soldier is expected to live up to. It's a vast reservoir of feeling which can be called on to legitimize the Army's actions, whatever they may be. The peasant boys who form the backbone of the PLA are trained not to think, but to believe in the correctness of their actions. They are the guardians of the party, and killing the state's enemies is their job. It's the party who defines the enemies.
Can we save our planet from ourselves? We're making progress, but there's much more still to be done. Coming up, we'll show you how you can make a difference as the Discovery Channel presents Earth Guide. Next.